Vishnu Padaya
Om
Krishna Prasthante Himati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskadhyade Satarana. Can you see my face because there's so much reflection?
Yes. Yeah, we can see you, Maharaj.
Yes, we can see you quite clearly, and it's a beautiful blue sky behind you.
Okay, good. So today we're reading from the Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 6, Sankhya Yoga, text number 7. Chitatmana prasantasya paramatma samahita chitoshna sukadukeshu tatamana pamanayo. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. One who has conquered the mind, the super souls are reached, he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. Prabhupada's purport. Actually, every living entity is intended to abide by the dictation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What's seated in everyone's heart is Paramatma. And the mind is misled by the external illusory energy, one becomes entangled in the material activities. Therefore, as soon as one's mind is controlled through one of the yoga systems, one should be considered to have reached the destination. One has to abide by superior dictation. When one's mind is fixed on the superior nature, he has no alternative but to follow the dictation of the Supreme. The mind must emit some superior dictation and follow it. The effect of controlling the mind is that one automatically follows the dictation of the Paramatma, or the super soul. Because its transcendental position is at once achieved by one who is in Krishna consciousness, the devotee of the Lord is unaffected by the dualities of material existence, namely distress and happiness, cold and heat, etc. This state is practical samadhi, or absorption in the Supreme. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasad Om Agyanatimanandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. The preceding verses, Krishna had said, Udarad Atmanatmanam Atmanam Avasarayat Atmaiva Yatmano Bandura Atmaiva Ripur Atmanaha. That a man must elevate himself by his own mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. For one who has conquered the mind, it's the best of friends. But for one who's failed to do so, his very mind will be the greatest enemy. One who has conquered the mind, the super souls are reached, he has attained tranquility. To such a person, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. The purpose of the Bhagavad Gita is to liberate ourselves, the soul, from material entanglement. And we ourselves were entangled in the material existence due to our false ego, which desires to lord it over the material nature. In other words, we're all transcendental, beyond the modes of material nature, or as Krishna says, despite contact with this material body, or Arjuna, the soul is neither entangled nor is he doing anything. But we're certainly a soul having a material experience. And this material experience is not meant to necessarily be very pleasant. If you think you're having a pleasant material existence, then you're in trouble. And if we think we're having a horrible material existence, but we don't know that we're a soul having a horrible material existence, we're also in trouble. If we know that we're a soul and that we're having a horrible material existence, and the purpose of the material existence is to get us out of material existence, then we can make progress in spiritual life. Anyone who thinks they're having a good time in the material world will not try to find happiness in the spiritual world or in spiritual consciousness. Just like Prabhupada used to give the example of a pig. Indra was once cursed to become a pig. And he came to this earthly planet, and he was given a very beautiful pig wife with a very wonderful tail. He was enchanted by it. Plus, he had very beautiful little piglets as children. So in English, he was in hog heaven. He was in pig heaven. But one day Brahma came and said, my dear Indra, although you're a pig now, I'd like you to come back to the heavenly kingdom because it's being mismanaged in your absence. But Indra said, no, I can't go. It's not possible. I have my family to look after. Look at my wife. Isn't she beautiful? Look at that tail. Isn't that exciting? And look at my children. They eat more stool than anyone else I know. They're my expansions. I cannot leave this wonderful place. Free rent. I don't pay for anything here. Free food. It's always served hot. And I don't even have to pay for my children's education. I can sleep all day. No one will complain. Eat as much as I want. Get as fat as I want. And no one tells me to lose weight. This is the life. How can I give it up? Besides that, I have so many girlfriends. And even I'm attracted to my mother, my sister. Everyone looks beautiful to me. Even you, Brahma, looks beautiful to me. How can I give up this heavenly life? So Brahma took a sword and cut off the head of his wife and his children, and he said, you're next. And then Indra, in the form of a pig, said, on second thought, maybe I should go back to the heavenly kingdom and become Indra there again. So everyone in the material world is thinking they're having a good time. A few problems here and there, but by modern technology, by advancement of science, by studying self-help books, somehow or another, I'm going to make my life happy, peaceful, practically forever. So one who has faith in according to Prahlad Maharaj, in that type of experience in the material world, Prahlad Maharaj analyzes it and says, Tirana Krishna Parataksatova Vito Bipadyeta Grihavradanam Adanta Gobira Vishitam Tamizram Punak Punas Charvata Charvananam. So material means consciousness. So as explained in this verse, what we have is consciousness. We're conscious. We ourselves, we have a spiritual body, all of us. It may not be fully manifested, but we're all spiritual beings. And as the sun gives off sunlight, so the soul gives off consciousness. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yata prakashyat dekam, kritsnam lokimam rivi, kshetra kshetri tata kritsnam prakashyati bharata. Just like the sun alone illuminates the whole universe with its sunlight. So the soul, situated within the body, specifically within the heart, illuminates the entire body with its consciousness. So that's our only activity in the material world. Number one, illuminating our body with consciousness, as is explained that due to the sunlight, so the material universe is maintained. And so the light of the soul, the energy of the soul, his consciousness, is why the body is maintained. It's not just eating food that maintains the body. You can get a dead body and you could grind up the food and feed it to the dead body. But the dead body is not going to be healthy, even if you give them the best healthy food. It's due to the presence of the soul and the super soul that the body appears to be alive. Just like due to the presence of the soul, the sun in the universe, the universe has its activities go on. Therefore, that's one aspect of the soul, consciousness. But because we're conscious, we're not a dead stone. Therefore, we have the capacity to desire. When we're in the material existence, then we've acquired a false ego. Prabhupada has explained that in the Bhagavad Gita, how the false ego is obtained. Does anyone know that? How you get a false, we all got a false ego, or how we get a false ego and maintain it? Were we sitting around one day and it crept up on us and grabbed us? How did we get a false ego? What's the beginning?
False identification.
Well, it's certainly, that's what it is. It's a false identification. But actually it starts with hearing.
I am the car.
That's called a ahankar. But that doesn't explain how we got it. It begins with hearing about the glories of sense gratification, specifically. In the material world, we have this body, and we hear about the glories of utilizing the body for sense gratification. Especially in modern society, things go on, modern ugra karma. Ugra means terrible, horrible activities go on simply by advertisement. Just like McDonald's. McDonald's is famous for its hamburgers. But when children heard that actually they have to kill animals in order to get a hamburger, they didn't want to eat the hamburgers anymore because they didn't want to kill animals. So what McDonald's did is that they put hamburgers on a tree, hanging from a tree. And then the children would go and pick the hamburgers off the tree, thinking that the tree was the source of the hamburgers. And then they would eat them. So similarly, if we actually go deeper into the reality of material existence, it doesn't seem as attractive as the advertisements are. Every year they spend literally billions of dollars advertising things. And then when you get it, it's not quite what they advertise. It doesn't meet the standard that you were expecting. Sometimes when I was going over devotees' houses to give lectures, nowadays they have a separate room, big room, for the children's toys. And the children have more toys than the parents have clothes. And most of them are not used because the children watch on television advertisements for so many things, including toys, candy, toys, whatever, video games. And then they demand that the parents go and buy them. And after the children get the toys, they play with them for a while, they get bored, and then they start breaking them because they have it's like when you eat bubble gum, you chew on bubble gum. At first, there's a little sweetness in the bubble gum, but then after the sugar is taken out of the gum, there's no more sweetness, and all one is doing is working one's jaws. So similarly, the material world is just based on mostly false advertisement. As it says in Bhagavad Gita, Yamimam pushpatam bhacham, pravavanya vipassita, veda vatarata parta, nanyam astiti varina, karmatmaka swagapura, janma karampala pradam, kriya visheshu baulam bhagaishvaragatim prati. Men of small knowledge are very much attracted to the flowery language of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to the heavenly planets, resulting in good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of heavenly enjoyment and opulent life, they say that there's nothing more than this. Generally speaking, people don't read the Vedas. They read the newspapers or go on Facebook or drive by and watch advertisements. So compared to what the Vedas are advertising, we're living in a very poor age, but with a lot of advertisement. So when the mind hears this advertisement, it becomes attracted. What would it be like to eat that piece of pizza? It looks so good. And everyone's smiling after they eat it. Maybe I'll smile too. What about that car? A little bit more expensive than the piece of pizza, but they're in ecstasy driving it. See their happy faces. I can be happy too. I'll buy it too. But then one buys the car, and then one has to pay for it every month. One has to clean it. You have to pay for insurance. You have to get a garage to put it in, or else someone will scratch it. You have to put in gasoline and oil and water. And instead of having a car working for you, you're working for the car. As a matter of fact, you don't have any time to do anything but work for the car. So as advertisers, will make your life happy, peaceful, prosperous, and it makes it complicated, very difficult to maintain. And yet people think they're making progress by so-called modern civilization. And if they hear about simple living, Prabhupada says, and high thinking, they think this is something primitive. What to speak if they hear that in the spiritual world, no one has an education, a formal education. There are no schools. There's no public school. There's no secondary school. There's no university. As a matter of fact, God, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the cowherd boy. He never went to school. He doesn't even wear shoes. He eats with his hands. Could you imagine that? And he lives in a village where the main occupation is herding cows. So people think this is barbaric. At least if Krishna is God and he knows everything, at least he should come here and bet on the stock market or something, on a horse. That way he can actually make some money, do something productive. But he's using it to herd cows. And his friends, the gopis, his girlfriends, they don't even have, they're churning butter all day long. Can't they get a machine to churn butter? I mean, even here, we have machines to do that. Not only that, but they're making flower garlands. How primitive. Why don't they get something more, why don't they make garlands out of gold or something, or silver, something that's worthwhile? Why flowers? What can you do with flowers? And not only that, but their main business is dancing and singing and eating and playing sports. This is really primitive. So people reject the idea that they think the more I complicate my mind by complicating my activities and worrying about my future and lamenting about my past and competing with everyone else doing the same thing, who's going to get a bigger building, who's going to get a bigger car, who's going to have more money in the bank, that this is really life. This is what civilization is. that you advance in civilization, the more anxiety you're in. The more you have things to worry about, then the more progress you're making. And as far as old age, disease, and death, well, that you don't have to worry about, because the scientists will solve all those problems. Soon they'll have a pill. You take it, you'll grow younger every day. You'll never die. This body will never die. Matter of fact, you'll grow younger. And if you want to be 5 years old for the rest of eternity, they'll give you a pill for it. You can be you can become the fifth Kamora. So that's what they promise. I remember reading in one magazine when I was 7 years old that within 20 years, a scientist will invent a pill, and when you take it, you'll never die. Unfortunately, I found out that the person who wrote the article, who was a scientist, he's died since then. So the point is, we are spiritual souls, we're eternal, but we've forgotten that because we're engaged in a false endeavor to become the lords of something. That somehow or another we want to be the supreme. And our false ego is always telling us we'll be able to do it if we endeavor enough, with enough knowledge. We can actually become something that we're not. That we can live in the material world, which Krishna says, dukkhalayam ashasvatam, is temporary and full of misery. We can make this world by our science, by our endeavor, by our efforts, by our materialistic advancements. We can make this world eternal and full of bliss if we just get the proper knowledge. But actually, the real knowledge is that it's impossible. We can't even stop one atom from changing, what to speak of a universe from changing. We can't even stop ourselves from aging one moment, and yet we think we're going to be eternal here. So Krishna gives us the opportunity to hear from him about our actual situation, which is quite good, being that we're spiritual beings, all of us, and we're all eternal, and we're by nature full of bliss. We're always happy, and everything in spiritual world is enjoyable and tasty. There's nothing but pleasure there in endless varieties. It makes a Janmashtami feast look quite dull compared to actual spiritual experience, with endless varieties of happiness and love and pleasure. But we've traded it in just for a hope of becoming somehow or another the center of attention in a temporary, very disturbing material existence. And life after life, we've been convinced that this life is going to be different from all the other lives. This life, we're actually going to achieve something we've not been able to achieve since time immemorial being here. We're going to be eternal here and full of awareness of how to be happy forever. But that's just a dream. So devotional service means that we hear from Krishna, and as we're hearing from about the materialistic conceptions of life, so we hear from Krishna and then use our intelligence to compare which is more reasonable. Simply to work to gratify our demands of our senses, or to work while meeting the demands of the senses, to utilize our senses at the same time, are active in our senses and our knowledge acquiring senses, to concentrate our minds upon Krishna through devotional service. Now, everyone has to accept some superior nature as explained in this verse. What does that mean? As Krishna says, Dharmasya tatvam nihitam guhayam mahajano yena kata sabhanta. That everyone is looking for the superior to dedicate one's life to. One man, he heard that the constable, the policeman in the city, was in a very high position. So he went to serve first he went to serve the tax collector, because he heard the tax collector was coming around to everyone's house and everyone was giving him money. So the man thought, well, that's very good. If I become a servant to the tax collector, then I can get free money. Everyone will give me money. So he became a servant to the tax collector. And then he noticed the tax collector was giving the money to the mayor. So he thought, well, if the mayor gets all the money, let me become a servant to the mayor. Maybe one day I'll become the mayor and I'll get all the money. But then he saw the mayor was giving the money to the governor. So he thought, let me become a servant to the governor, because he's getting the money. The mayor is serving the governor. But then he saw the governor was serving the king. So he said, let me become a servant to the king. So he became a servant to the king. But then he saw the king was giving the revenue to the emperor and serving the emperor. So he decided to become a servant to the emperor. But then he saw the emperor was entering in the palace, he was entering into his deity room and serving the deity of Radha and Krishna. So he thought, well, if the emperor is serving Radha and Krishna, maybe I should do it too. So then he started to serve Radha and Krishna and became a pure devotee, because he found the highest truth. So everyone is looking to serve the highest that they know of, that attracts them. Nowadays, it may be a rock star, it may be a athlete, maybe a movie star, maybe a politician, but everyone wants to serve the superior. But who is the superior? Tarka apratishta shutiya vibhina. So people argue about who's better. My team's better than yours. This actress is more beautiful than the other actress. So there's arguments going on. And then there's also books of knowledge, whether scriptures or what people think like our scriptures nowadays, telling us what the highest truth is according to their knowledge. The perfection of life is to become an expert tennis player or a chess player, and how to do it, who the great heroes are of chess or tennis, or even butterfly collection. Everyone is looking for the hero in their life. And there are people advertising themselves as God or nearly God. I can stand on two hands. Someone else comes along, I can stand on one hand. I can stand on one finger. Oh, you've reached the highest truth. But dharmasya tatvam nihitam guhayam mahajano yena kata sabhanta. One has to find out what's the highest truth by investigation. In other words, if one is fortunate enough to come into contact with the devotee of Krishna and understand from Krishna's instructions that we're all spiritual beings, there's no question of ourselves becoming anything other than a spiritual being. We have our eternal spiritual identities, which have to be uncovered. But our material existence is just like a dream. We're not going to become better than anyone else just by having a better dream. We don't become worse than anyone else by having a bad dream. We don't change according to the body that we have. We're eternally the same. Therefore, everyone has an opportunity, even if they're not human beings, to utilize their bodies in the service of Krishna and uncover their real wealth, their real identity in relationship to Krishna. It's not a competition that I love Krishna, I have a better relation with Krishna than you have. But every relationship is absolute. And therefore, everyone by nature is part of the absolute. Only because we're misidentified ourselves with these gross and subtle material bodies, we think we're better or inferior. But in spiritual consciousness, we see everyone is better than us because we're in love with everyone. When one is in love with someone, then he naturally feels humble because he has full appreciation for them. So in our natural position, including Krishna in the spiritual world, no one there feels themselves, in one sense, to be superior to anyone else. Everyone feels themselves to be a subordinate. Even Krishna feels himself to be a subordinate lover of his devotees. And therefore, Krishna has full appreciation for his devotees, as the devotees develop full appreciation for him and for all the other devotees. So there, the competition is not to become the best, it's to become the best servant, the most loving, the most appreciative. So this material existence is just the opposite of real existence. Everyone is working to become the best, the greatest, the most opulent, either the strongest, or the most intelligent, or the most beautiful, or the most wealthy, or the most famous, or even the most renounced. But these things are all temporary, and they have no real relationship to our real self or our real interest. It's just part of our dream we're having. Just like at night, if we're dreaming that we become extremely wealthy, we may take it seriously during the dream, but when we wake up, what is the value of it? Couldn't you go to the bank and say, last night I dreamed I had $1 million in this bank account. Can I get at least half of it? What was the value of the dream? Similarly, when we wake up from this dream, either in the spiritual world or in another body, what was the value of all our dreaming here? All our activities here based on our misconception of identifying ourselves with the material existence. It has no value. On the other hand, when we identify ourselves with the spiritual existence and Krishna and his pure devotees in disciple succession, even when we do the smallest thing to try and please them under their directions, we make eternal advancement towards uncovering our actual identity and reuniting in our real existence in the spiritual world, in spiritual consciousness, where we love everyone all the time, eternally, and everything is always getting better and more beautiful. Everyone is getting younger and more enthusiastic. Everything is becoming fresher all the time. So we may think, well, this seems quite optimistic. But we should be optimistic about spiritual life. Unfortunately, we're more optimistic about material life, which is unreasonable, than we are about spiritual life, which makes some sense. Even here in the material world, when they're advertising for things, it's always in relationship to the same three things. That this product will make you happy, or this product will give you knowledge of how to become happy, or this product will give you knowledge of becoming happy for longer than anything else. But happiness is always the middle. Knowledge of how to become happy for a long time, So happiness is what everyone's looking for. But Krishna says if we don't accept spiritual knowledge that will bring us into our spiritual consciousness of the fact that we're eternal, if we're caught up, become disturbed or distracted by the temporary, thinking that we have an interest in the temporary rather than in the eternal, then the result is we'll be in anxiety and unhappy. Or as Krishna says, Nashti buddhiya yuktasya, nacha yuktasya bhavanaha, nacha bhavin shantir ashantaksya sukha, ashantasya sukham. One who's not in transcendental consciousness can have neither controlled mind nor steady intelligence, without which there can be no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? In other words, if we're not in spiritual consciousness, if we forget we're eternal, if we forget we have an eternal relationship with the supreme, all-attractive, loving person, Krishna, then we'll think we're this body. And if we think we're this body, then our minds will always be disturbed. And if our minds are disturbed, we won't be peaceful. And if we're not peaceful, how can we be happy? Therefore, we should, as Queen Kunti said, Vipadak Shanti Takshasvat Tatra Tatra Jagat Guru Bhavata Darshanam Niyasat Apana Bhavadarshana. She was explaining about all the problems she went through. Big problems. One time when devotee told Prabhupada, I know I'm a little devotee, but I have this big problem. And Prabhupada laughed and said, if you're a little devotee, how can a little devotee have a big problem? If you're a little devotee, you can only have little problems. So Queen Kunti, compared to us, she had big problems. Vishaya means they were served poison. Bhima was served poison. Vishan Mahagne Purushara Darshanam. Could you imagine for breakfast tomorrow, they serve you pure poison? That would be a problem, wouldn't it? And after they were fed poison, their house was set on fire. How many times has our house been set on fire with ourselves in it? And they ran out of the fire, out of the house, and they were met by Rakshasa who wanted to eat them. I mean, that's a problem life. You run out of your house, which is on fire, and the fireman there is a Rakshasa, and he wants to immediately eat you. It would be quite disappointing. So their life was like that. And she was praying for problems. Because why? Because in order to learn tolerance, we have to be put into a place of tolerance, into a situation where we have to tolerate. Unless we're put into a situation of tolerance, how can we possibly learn tolerance? If we think, why am I facing all these problems? We're facing them because, first of all, we deserve them. And second of all, Krishna has arranged them for us so that we can learn tolerance and steadily fix our mind on Krishna in spite of whatever problems we're facing. Now, if we think of the time of death, we're going to spontaneously remember Krishna without learning tolerance during this lifetime, we're quite mistaken. Unless we practice tolerance and determination to fix our minds upon Krishna in all kinds of situations, and how is it possible in the most difficult time, the time of death, to fix our minds upon Krishna. It won't be possible. And therefore, unless we practice, then we have to see repeated birth and death. But if we practice, in spite of whatever difficulties we're faced, then we'll become advanced in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, she welcomed the problems. But when the problems come, how to fix our mind on Krishna? We have to practice offenselessly chanting the holy names, calling out to Srimati Radharani and Krishna to engage us in their loving service in spite of any circumstance. Now, for most of us, we chant japa during the day, and it's not the most unfavorable circumstance. But even in the most not so unfavorable circumstance, still, sometimes we don't take it so seriously. We're not aware of the fact that we're growing old, we'll become diseased, we'll have to leave this body sooner or later, and then we'll have to go somewhere, either to the spiritual world or to the material world. So we should think when we're chanting japa that this is an opportunity to actually call out to Srimati Radharani and Krishna to engage me in loving service, so that when I am faced with difficulty, I'll continue to call out to Srimati Radharani and Krishna, engage me in their loving service. And indeed, if we sincerely do that, then what will happen is that we'll spontaneously remember Krishna. And even if we don't spontaneously remember Krishna and Srimati Radharani and his associates and their activities and pastimes, even if we don't, still, if we just hear ourselves sincerely calling out, personally calling out to Srimati Radharani and Krishna, then we make huge amount of advancement. Then we discover that Krishna is actually a person, and that Srimati Radharani is actually persons. And that our real business is to become dependent on them rather than on material existence. To remain fixed in consciousness of them in spite of whatever situations we're in, whether happy or distressed. So that at the time of leaving this body, we can even more sincerely call out to them to engage us in the loving service. And the result is that we'll become eligible to go back to the spiritual world. Janma karma chame divyam evam yoveti tatvataha tyakpadeham panarjanma naiti mam eti sarjana. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities is not upon leaving this body take birth again in the material world, but attains to the transcendental world, O son of Kunti. So practice the sadhana. It's the most important thing in our existence. It's a great opportunity in the human form of life, especially chanting the holy names. And whatever thoughts come through our minds, anxieties about the past, lamentations about the past, anxieties about the future, just let them come and go. And let them serve as impetuses to take even more shelter of Krishna. When we see how tricky the material nature is, how it's trying to delude us into becoming concerned, overly concerned with our material existence, take it as an impetus to cry out to Krishna even more to save us from this tricky material energy. It's always trying to cheat us and put us into the path of birth and death. And if we do that, then Krishna will help. Then the holy name will reveal himself. The holy names will reveal themselves to us, and we'll be situated in our real existence rather than chanting the glories of material existence and suffering repeatedly the problems of material existence, life after life, in 8,400,000 species of life. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Tirthapad.
Hare Krishna Gurudev. Thank you. I just had a question about you sometimes speak about we're supposed to act on the liberated platform as second-class devotees, like essentially in the preaching mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So how can we distinguish between a devotee who's acting on who is a Krishna Adhikari, but acting on the second class platform, and somebody who is on that platform. Like,
well, the symptoms of
are.
a symptoms of a second class devotee, Madhyama Adhikari. The main symptom is that he loves Krishna and he makes friends with the devotees and he helps the innocent and he avoids the atheist. So we can observe that in our own lives, that we can see, how much do I love Krishna? How much am I dedicated to his service? How long during the day how often during the day am I even thinking about Krishna? What to speak of dedicated to him? How much am I making friends with the devotees? How much do I respect my superiors and appreciate their activities? How much do I have friends on my same level, who I can reveal my mind to and get their input, their instructions, how I can make advancement in devotional service, and I can give them honest feedback on their own devotional service and assist them in advancement? How much am I respectful and fatherly, in a fatherly way, trying to help those who are less advanced than I am in devotional service? So if I can see my own advancement according to those qualifications, then surely I can observe others and see how respectful they are, how dedicated they are to the service of superiors, how much they're willing to make friendships with equals, how much they're fatherly or motherly towards those who are subordinate, and in a very loving way trying to help them elevate themselves to a higher level. So we can observe that if we ourselves are trying to practice that. And Krishna will give us the intelligence to see how others are practicing the very thing that we're supposed to be practicing. But if we're taken up in the material existence, if we remain Kanishta Adhikaris and we don't work on the Madhyama Adhikari platform, then we'll appreciate others, but maybe not for the right reasons. We'll appreciate those who know how to influence others to gain some positions, or those who are more advanced in some talent or some wealth or something than we are, and we'll think they're great personalities to be followed. So we have other aspirations, then we'll be observant to others who are superior in those aspirations than we are, more talented in some sport, or for our case, more followers, more wealth, more positions than we have. We'll think that this is the sign of advancement. And therefore, when we meet someone like Kolavik or Sridhar, who's sitting in a hut with practically no roof overhead and drinking from an iron pot, we think that this devotee is a failure. No followers, didn't initiate anyone. No one washes his clothes. He doesn't even have a good pot to drink out of. Now, if he was actually chanting Hare Krishna, certainly someone would recognize that and ask him for initiation. But he's just sitting here in a hut, just chanting Hare Krishna. Doesn't even hardly get anything to eat. So we'll mistake him as an ordinary devotee and not understand how he was absorbed in Krishna's service. His whole life was dedicated to pleasing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu offered him the opportunity to become the king on this planet, he refused it. Because compared to his meditation on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna's loving pastimes, he felt that would be insignificant. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu offered him to make him the king of the whole universe. He refused. He offered him all mystic powers. He refused. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, "What do you want?" So he said, "I simply want you to come every day and steal my banana leaves and my bananas. You come as a Brahmin every day and do that." Because he was in love with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna. So how do we see love? We see love by humility, by service, by appreciation, by dedication. These are some of the things. Whether the person has followers or wealth, or they seem to be in a superior material position than we are, these things are not how we judge. We shouldn't judge it ourselves, that yesterday I had so many followers, I had so much wealth, I had so many positions, and now I've lost it all. So I've lost everything. And indeed, if that's how we judge things, then of course we'll lose everything, today or tomorrow. But if we're fixed in Krishna consciousness, and chanting sincerely, asking Radha and Krishna, Srimati Radharani and Krishna, to engage us in the loving service, we chant with sincerity and listen with attention, and remember Krishna, and start thinking about Krishna and seeing things in relation to Krishna, then the result is that we'll be able to see how others are doing this, or how much others are trying to do the same thing too. Is that right?
Thank you, Gurudev. Yes, thank you.
Anything else? Did you have a question, Savitri? No? Okay. Anyone else have a question?
Да, Гурудев, хочу спросить, скажите, пожалуйста, а чем отличается вот наше духовное понимание, вот убежденность, что у нас будет рано или поздно духовное тело от, скажем, психологического самоубеждения, что ну, позитивный взгляд на мир, да, все будет хорошо, как бы мы там достигнем своих целей.
Could you please explain to Mataji Savitri what is the difference between an actual sureness that we can experience that sooner or later we will become, we have the spiritual body and that we will become spiritual and we will get to the goal. How is that different from just, what is it, self-help, self-motivation, what is it when we are, I'm sorry, I don't know this psychiatric term, to when we are convinced ourselves, positive thinking or like affirmations. What is the difference between that and the actual spiritual, let's say, sureness that this is a fact?
Well, unless there's realization, it is kind of like that. In other words, we have to learn the science of realizing Krishna. Now, we ourselves are not the only cause of realization. We have to hear, as Krishna says, Machita Machkata Prana Bodhi and Tashparashparam. We have to hear from devotees, and then we have to understand how to apply what we heard in becoming more steady in our service to Krishna with more enthusiasm, not only with our body, but with our mind and with our words. Then Krishna says, Tadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. Then he gives us the intelligence by which we can come to him. In other words, he gives us the realization by which we actually can experience Krishna consciousness. And unless we experience Krishna consciousness, it just remains on the theoretical platform. We can say Krishna is there, Krishna is there, Krishna is there, but unless we act as if Krishna is there, then it'll simply be a theory that Krishna is there. So first of all, we have to learn to believe how Krishna is there with our intelligence, that there is a Krishna. But then we have to learn how to belong to Krishna's family. That's the Madhyamadikari. he makes friends with the devotees. He becomes part of their family. And he brings others, into the innocent people, into their family, into Krishna's family. And those who are against Krishna's family, he avoids them. If not, if he can't defeat them, then he avoids them. So that first we believe in Krishna, then we start to belong to Krishna's family. Then we become a pure devotee of Krishna. Then we integrate into Krishna's family in complete love and devotion, and then we can enter into the spiritual world, where that's all that exists there, is Krishna's eternal family, full of love and devotion to each other. So we have to practice that in this world, and then Krishna will give us the realization of what that experience is. And then it won't just be Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. It'll be actually, my dear Krishna, my dear Srimati Radharani, please engage me in your loving family, where I can be a member of one of the members of your family again. Is that right? Hare Krishna. Agnihotra?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. There is one question from Anastasia Stoiko. She was in a Russian-speaking group and here in translation, but technically not can in Zoom. So I read her question. When she has a very strong desire to preach in another country, is it self-deception, or she must follow her desire?
Depends what country it is. I don't know. If she wants to go to the South Pole and preach it may not be the best place to go. Prabhupada said first deserve and then desire. In that sense that to go to another country, what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, whoever we meet, we can tell them about Krishna. Why do we have to go somewhere else? Unless there are no people in the country that we live in. So we should start with telling people, whoever we meet, try to think about in a very intelligent way how we can help them elevate their consciousness towards Krishna. We may not be able to directly tell them about Krishna, but how to help them, whoever they are, make progress even to become a little bit better in their lives, a little bit better person. Because that's our eternal service. In the spiritual world, no one has anything else to do but to serve others. And to serve others in the spiritual world also means to help them develop their relation with Krishna in a more intimate, more loving way. So that's our business here also. And if we recognize that, then we have unlimited opportunity to serve anywhere. We're not interested in getting fame from our service. We're not interested in making any gain from our service. We're not afraid of losing anything from our service. But our service is to know what Krishna wants us to do to help elevate others towards their loving relation with Krishna. And that will make our lives perfect. That's all we have to do. Narayani Devi Dasi.
Hare Krishna, Gurudev. So you mentioned that all relations with Krishna are absolute, and then I understood that whether we are devotees or not, it doesn't really matter to Krishna, but I think I confused something. Would you mind elaborating a bit more on that?
Yes. Well, Krishna, we're all by nature devotees of Krishna. Either Krishna directly, as Krishna in his form as Krishna or his incarnations. That's one devotees of Krishna. The others are devotees of Krishna also, but they're devotees of Krishna's energies. To become a devotee of Krishna's energy means to suffer, because that's the job of Durga, is to chastise us for worshiping her we get chastised by her. Because she wants us to become a devotee of Krishna directly, not indirectly through Krishna's energies. The energies of Krishna are moving under Krishna's direction, and therefore they're also representatives of Krishna, but not in the most desirable way. Just like the example is given that a father, he sees that the son is not acting properly, but he doesn't want to chastise the son because he's afraid it may spoil their relationship. So he gives the son over to a chastising agent to rectify the son. So the chastising agent is working under the direction of the father to rectify the son, but it's not the aim is to come back to the proper relation with the father, not just to get chastised. Is that all right?
Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you very much. Spasiba Bolshoi. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai.
Jai.
Ki Jai.
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 Hare Krishna.
Hare Hare
Hare Krishna.
Спасибо, дорогой Гуру Махарадж. Спасибо большое.
Hare
Харе
Krishna.
Кришна.
Hare Krishna.
Харе Кришна.